Hey everyone, welcome back to the Leadership Project with your host Mick Spears. Our vision is to inspire all leaders to challenge the status quo. We bring you weekly topics and thought-provoking guests to get you to stop, reflect, and think about what it means to be a leader in a modern world. Our aim is to help you become the leader you wish you always had, as we learn together and lead together. Today's episode is brought to you by Pat Flynn and his team at SPI, or Smart Passive Income. I am often asked questions about how I do all the things I do, whether it be this podcast, our cohort-based courses, or just structuring my business. Well, Pat has been a great inspiration to me, and I benefit greatly from being part of his community, SPI Pro, and from the SPI courses and workshops they offer. We are including a link in the show notes where you too can apply to be a part of SPI Pro or take advantage of their amazing courses and workshops. Now, on with the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Leadership Project. I'm greatly honored today to be joined by an inspirational woman who's working and succeeding in a male-dominated world. I'm joined today by Yemi Penn. Yemi describes herself as an engineer by profession and an entrepreneur by passion. Amongst other things, she's a transformational coach, and she's the author of the book, Did You Get the Memo? She also produced and starred in a documentary called Did I Choose My Trauma? And I highly recommend everyone to catch this. Go and look out for it. We'll put the link in the show notes so that you can see it. It's really thought-provoking, and for me, it was quite changing and transformational for me. She's also a mum of two and running 3+ businesses across the globe. So absolutely an inspirational woman, a great way for us to round out our series of interviews with inspirational women that we've been doing throughout the month of March to celebrate International Women's Day. So without further ado, Yemi, please say hello to our audience. Please introduce yourself and a little bit more about your background and what led you to be with us today.
Wow, thank you, Mick. You know, hearing myself, having done a few podcasts, that was probably an introduction where it felt like you knew who I was or who I was trying to become. And I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And hi to everyone. I mean, the Leadership Project can go into so many different areas. And the reason why I was drawn, and once again, really grateful to be on here, is because it's taken me a little while to acknowledge myself as a potential leader. When I hear the name leader, I kind of have royalty come to my mind. It's the first thing that comes to my mind. I sometimes also just have just the people who do not look and sound like me. So there was almost this other not. And that's kind of been the highlight of my journey, trying to waffling through what is my purpose? What can I do? What can't I do? Can I set up businesses? Can I be a single mom? Can my story actually help other people change their lives? And I guess even though it's a very much overused word for good measure, the transformative journey that has got me to have the audacity to start saying, I am a leader, a thought leader, as I put myself, is huge. And I guess part of my mission is how can I continue to use my voice to let everyone else who wants to be a leader know that there's actually space waiting for them. So that's probably the best I can summarize. And there's so many things. And as you know, I do so many things. But yeah, that's really the crux of who I am and why I'm here.
Yeah, we're going to get into many of those things that you've done leading up to now, Yemi, and there's so many powerful messages within there. I want to start with what you've already said, though, that identity. So was there a moment in time where you went, well, actually, yes, I am a leader?
Yeah, you know what, even though, I think it was when I opened my first business, and how interesting that I would attach it to business. Because once again, I thought leadership was purely people who work in a business arena of some sort. It was when I opened my second business in the UK, but I lived in Australia. I remember I was putting the gym together, but this was before the launch. And someone came in and he had his kid on his, like over his shoulders. He came in and he said, I heard a woman's opened this stuff, like, because the area, South London, Brixton, has become very gentrified. So local communities have moved. And this is where a lot of immigrants from Africa and Jamaica moved to in London. So the whole area is changing. But something had happened. That conversation was happening, saying, oh, a Black woman of African descent has actually opened up a gym in the area. Like, we didn't even know, like, there were more people who were still able to set up businesses. And that was the first time I thought, oh, I'm a leader. My actions, without necessarily trying to lead other people, has people talking about it and coming in just to see if it's true. He shook my hand and then he left. And I think that was the first time I thought, okay, I could actually lead without putting this cloak of power over me, but just being. That was a pivotal moment for me.
So that's your F45 franchise in Brixton, and congratulations on your success there. And I think F45 is a wonderful group of people that have got a great mission in their life as well, in terms of what they're trying to create. So well done in being part of that. There's elements I love of that story, and there's elements I don't like, to be honest. I mean, the element of bias that it shouldn't be. I'm going to borrow some words from Alessandra Wall here, my good friend. It shouldn't be noteworthy that a woman of African descent opened a gym. It shouldn't be. But I'm also glad that it was inspirational for someone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And that just shows, I guess, your character. But the fact that someone said yesterday, was it Morgan Freeman? Someone told me Morgan Freeman said the best way to get rid of this race conversation is you stop calling me Black and I stop calling you white. We want that. We want that world very quickly. And I think this is what I'm still trying to figure out. Can we get to that world without acknowledging the way we have devised and created that separation? Question mark. So I completely hear you.
It's really challenging, Yemi. I'm going to share something that I'm still struggling with. And I'd love your view on this one. I've asked this one to multiple podcast guests, and I don't think we've ever landed on this. I want to see a world where we celebrate people's cultural heritage. We celebrate, but not in a way that brings any bias or discrimination. And I don't know how to describe that in any way, where we want to see people for who they really are. So Abona, if you like, we want to see the real person, the whole of the person, including all of their cultural heritage that made them who they are, and then immediately go, that is so wonderful. What do you bring to the table?
Yes.
And celebrate you, and then ignore the race. It's really hard to describe. Any thoughts on that?
I think the first thing that comes to mind, I think these are two powerful ones, but not all. I think if we all as individuals worked on two things, I think we could do that without any bias. If we worked on our fear, the fear of whatever it is we might lose, then I think that would be a big step. And there's a lot to that. You know, I'm listening to Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, which is very little about money, which is fascinating. It's actually about, it's almost about everything else but that. It's really a fascinating read or listen. But they speak about the 6 main different fears. And fear of criticism tends to be the big one, which goes back in history. But I think if we worked on our different fear stories, that would be one, because we tend to fear what we don't know. I think that's one thing, even if we're interested. And I think the next thing would have to be our belief systems. Just as you were talking, my brain was going on a party, and I was thinking, if I was to think of the culture in Tanzania, where you've got a lot of the Maasai warriors who jump really high, we might be awed by it, but my belief system might say, oh, if you do that, you're going to hurt yourself. So you could see me wincing. And this is a very mild form of bias, of me already having an opinion that because people around my ecosystem can't do that, how can they do that? And that's a very mild example, but my belief system is what's stopping me or making me create bias. So for me, if we looked at fear and our belief systems, and maybe just you saying that, maybe that becomes what we do on this harmony days we have. Maybe we go and have different cultures and say, how can we sit and either hear stories or actions and then find out what bias comes up for us? And that becomes the tool for changing it. And hopefully every year it gets better.
Yeah, really interesting, Yemi. And one of the things that I've been processing a lot lately is the acknowledgement that we are all biased. Even me, who kind of prides myself on not being prejudiced or discriminatory in any way, the bias is still there. And noticing and naming it, that's okay too, but it's how you respond to it and whether it impacts your decision-making and what you do from that moment onwards that really makes the big difference. So then you can get to that point where you celebrate the heritage, celebrate the culture, but don't let it influence you in any kind of equality or equity way. So you ensure that you're driving equity and equality while still seeing the person and everything that made up that person to be who they are. Yeah, really interesting. All right, I want to talk about did you get the memo? What inspired you to write that?
Failing horribly, or seeming like I'd failed horribly. And for me, I think the ultimate crisis point for me was when I relocated to Australia 8 years ago. So if I could just paint a picture, it was definitely a broken woman, but I didn't think I was broken, but I definitely felt it. Broken woman. I had a 7-year-old and a 7-month-old, and they had 2 different dads. So I already thought failing from a Nigerian, like a West African perspective, where pride, as I'm sure with other cultures, is placed on the family, the nuclear family. I'd already obliterated that, and I was about to go through a divorce with my son's father, who was in a different country. So I completely, if there was a nuclear family, if there was the right way to do things, I was absolutely effing it up, like big time. And I think subconsciously Australia was my hideout. But in that hideout, I got a bit of silence. I got a bit of my own voice. And the more I spoke to people, because that's where the bravery is in speaking to people, is that you almost find out you're not alone, which then really empowers you. Because I would speak about it and I would just find one person, and before you know it, I'd speak to somebody else. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I thought it was just me who didn't get the memo on how life is to be lived and to go to university, get the degree, white picket fence. And I'm not knocking this because that has worked for decades and centuries. But I had to call BS on it because the shame story was huge. It was really huge for me. But then it turned out literally, if there is a memo out there, I didn't get it, John didn't get it, Bokia didn't get it, like lots of people didn't get it. And I just decided, okay, let me just write this and see if, I don't know, a new memo can be created. And it's borderline comical, but the more I get on stage and speak, the more everyone resonates with it.
Yeah, there's 2 really powerful things that are coming out for me here, Yemi, that I want to test with you. The first one is who and how do you define success, right?
Yeah.
So should it be society's expectation that becomes your judge and jury as to whether you are successful or not, or should it be you, Yemi? Yeah. Should it be Yemi Penn that decides whether she is a success? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it should absolutely be me. It should be us as individuals. The question is, how do you then exist in the world? I'm currently maintaining 2 homes, possibly to protect the view of what the world says is right. We have a place, Lake Macquarie, I think we spoke about this last time, Lake Macquarie, where it's just green. And I find that my peace here is more because I'm not taunted by the really fancy car that's driving down the road or the house that has 4 levels. And once again, I'm not knocking it, but my own inner desires stir so much that, I start to think what's not right with my life. So sometimes because we see on the outside what we think success is, that's the challenge. That's what we need to be working on, is how can we remain content with what I've defined as success? I think the narrative's changing a bit, but my goodness, I went into, Sydney Central Business District and saw all these shops, and I found myself going through a bias of like, did someone just pay $10,000 for a Hermes bag? But once again, that means my brain still thinks that's an element of success. So there's a lot of unlearning and unindoctrinating that's necessary. I want to quickly add this one as well, where, even my own bias, I took my kids to Fiji once, and you had these kids just playing, barefoot, I think kicking a tin. I've seen this growing up in Nigeria. I started to tell them a story of, you see how lucky you should be to have shoes. And something like I get downloads said, Yemi, come on now. These kids look happier than your kids.
Yeah.
So what makes you think they want these shoes you speak of? And I should know this. I grew up in it. I grew up in Nigeria, possibly that kid without the shoes playing. Not because we couldn't afford the shoes, because we didn't want it. So there's a lot of work for us to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So your definition of success and society's definition of success is everyone is different, right? And I'll go with both of those examples. The person that buys the Hermes bag for $10,000, if they're buying it because that makes them feel good and they love that product and it's some kind of cherished possession for them, then great. If they're buying it out of some kind of comparison syndrome where they're trying to keep up with their friends and it's a status symbol, that kind of thing does worry me. And I love your story there about the kids in Fiji. I bet they were having literally a ball, playing soccer and also beaming smiles on their face. Who's to say who is more successful, those kids playing soccer versus the person driving down the road in a BMW? Yeah, so wonderful. The other thing that came into my head when you were discussing about the kind of that expectations is about joy and fulfillment. So what role do you believe that joy and fulfillment comes into this about defining your own success?
Joy and fulfillment. So I spoke at the Happiness and Its Causes event yesterday, which is an event apparently that goes on for a long time. The Dalai Lama presents there often and did a couple of years remotely. And a lady came to me and said, I'm really tired of all the psychologists talking about happiness. And she said, and I was trying to understand why. And she said, I'm content. I've retired. I'm content. Happiness shouldn't be, I don't know. She was trying to differentiate between happiness and content. She couldn't understand why there was so much focus on happiness when she was content. So I'm now left still thinking. So I don't have the full answer, but I wanted to share that to see whether, our listeners come up with their own and they can, write, give comments on your pages. But joy, I think joy is when you're in the now, even if it's not great. And is that contentment? I don't know. I have, I've started doing alternative methods of just understanding who I am and methods of healing. So I get readings just on either my numerology or my chart. And the one thing that one of the astrologers who I worked with said to me that I absolutely loved, he said, Yemi, part of your mission is to experience and enjoy life's full force. And my definition of that was to enjoy the tough moments as well as the really good moments. And that has been eye-twitching, but I believe I get it now. And trust me, I'm going through some difficult moments at the time, but what I'm enjoying is seeing how I move and how I dance with the discomfort. Seeing when I decide to tap into my masculine or my feminine energy, it's not the actual thing that I like. I'd rather do without it, but it's me going and meandering through it. So joy and fulfillment is so subjective. I think I'd be irresponsible try to put it as one thing, because I now find joy even in the difficult moments because it means I'm alive.
That's really interesting. I'm definitely going to come back to that in a moment with a quote that you often use. That's really interesting. And I love that you're, regardless of what happened, and life happens, right? It's not all roses. It never is. So life happens. And I love this perspective that you're developing here, that even when there's challenging times, that you're still enjoying that moment and learning from it. And yes, of course, enjoy the happy times and when things go right. But I love that you're enjoying the experience of life regardless of what's happening. There was one more thing that you said a moment ago that I think was really important, which was about when you find people that have experienced the things that you have experienced. So you spoke about when you're open and you talk to people about you're going through at any moment, that people start coming out and saying, I've experienced that too, Yemi. And one of the ones that dawned on me recently, Alina Svetoskaya was on our show, and she was speaking about imposter syndrome at one point. And she was mentioning that when she polls her students and her audience, etc., and she brings up imposter syndrome, that 90% of the people in the room stick up their hand and are either experiencing it at that very moment or have experienced it before. And we talk about it now, but that's not something that was talked about for a long time. Tell us more about this experience of sharing openly what's going on, and then you're finding, oh, there's other people like me that also didn't get the memo.
Yeah, I think it's what you said earlier. It's that encapsulation of sawubona, I see you. And I always get this wrong. I don't know if it's a Zulu word, but there's a response to that. I can't ngokona possibly, which means, thank you, I'm here to be seen. And as a result of being seen, I see you. It's this beautiful exchange of just words, but it's got deep meaning. I think that literally is the epitome of sharing something that other people share. And when it happens, regardless of race, gender, culture, when that happens, I think that's when we experience true humanity. So the I want to say joy, the joy and the magic that is created in someone sharing a story that is either of pain or of joy, honestly, that's what brings them out. It's this inner knowing. And, I'm doing a PhD at the moment, and I have to check myself because I'm also not breaking the rules. I like to challenge status quo. I don't think studies can just be about hardcore data analytics science. I think it's partly got to be lived experience. I think people's stories need to be able to be the data that we think we're searching for. To say that if you're in a room and 100 people and 90 people experience this, then something is happening and there should be more in that. So that, it's an evolving experience, but it happens time and time again that we are never alone in how we're thinking. My question is, if we aren't alone, then what are we doing to change it? And do we need to change it?
Yeah.
Question mark.
Well, both of those are important questions, right? So the awareness and the acknowledgement is wonderful. And then deciding what are we going to do about it, and do we need to do something about it? It doesn't mean it's broken. Acknowledging and wearing it and being aware of it is really the first step. And I love that connectedness of what you're discussing there, that I see you, you see me, and because you see me, I see you. It's kind of that's really powerful as well. And that human connection, that's what life is all about. I want to come back now to this point that you make about that you're enjoying life, even the challenging parts. That one of your sayings is about being comfortable being uncomfortable. Tell us more about that.
So I heard that from a lady called Lavia Jai Jones. She did a TED talk, and it's funny, I was asked to kind of like manage a conversation around that. And ever since, and lots more people, they say very little knowledge is new knowledge. So we're probably just recycling a lot of stuff. I think saying that in one sentence gives people that aha moment or permission to not run away and completely leave their mind or their body when things get difficult. I think it's part of the reason why you were asking that question, how can we start to celebrate difference? It's the discomfort. It's the discomfort and whatever stories we create in our head as to why it is important not to be present for that discomfort. It has managed to become a culture. We have wars going on, and there were wars that were happening way before this. But I promise you, I don't think most of us who are not in that war are even daring to take our mind to what's really happening. Now, I don't know whether psychologically that's even safe to do so, but I'm intrigued. How do we know how bad or good it is if we won't get there? So I think there is an exercise of creating our own psychological safety and physical safety. But I think we've got to start getting uncomfortable if we want any change. Because all you have to do is talk about all the different challenges we are facing in the world. But the only people who really know how uncomfortable it is are those who are in it. And when I say get comfortable being uncomfortable, I'm inviting you to just imagine that or be a little bit in it, because that's when you can solve it. This is the reason why my whole pain to power philosophy in the past couple of years has come about, which is if we truly understand the pain, i.e. sit with the discomfort for long enough, the power is probably on the other side. You just got to sit through it.
That's really powerful, Yemi. I'm processing that in my brain.
I can see.
You'll probably tell. Because we talk about this. We talk about, self-protectionism. We talk about, sorry, I can't share with you. It's like a self-protection measure. I don't want to get hurt. And yet what I'm hearing from you is there's something more important on the other side of that hurt.
Yeah.
So if you are able to open yourself up, and I won't mention this on air just yet, I'm just not ready for it, but you and I discussed something before we hit record. You're encouraging me and you're inspiring me that I do need to talk about that thing, and that it will be uncomfortable, but I'll come out the other end as a richer person. So I'm self-protecting right now to not hurt myself, but maybe there's something better on the other side of that. And the other part I heard there is also then the empathy side of that. So what I just shared was a personal thing, but I have friends that live in the Ukraine, for example, and I'm worried about them, but I can't fully emphasize with them until I go through some of that discomfort and come out the other end as a richer person and a richer group of people because of that.
Yes. Yeah.
What's your reflections
so here's
there?
Beautifully said. And you definitely took me on a journey. I mean, we knew you and I were going to get into this in such a beautiful way. So I'm just enjoying it. As you were sharing, my brain was thinking that because I still test my hypothesis. And I promise you, I'm not that academic, but because I'm reading so many books and referencing, I have no choice but to use these words. I have this hypothesis, and not everybody needs to share their story. And I get it, the self-preservation. My personal story, I suppressed for years, but I spoke about it every and now again to people, which were signs I wanting to speak out. But I want to say that not everybody has to talk about it. But as you speak about the people in Ukraine, my mind goes to someone who did experience war in another, either lifetime or in this lifetime or a couple of years ago. And an example is I did a screening of my third documentary series called Cleaning Our Trauma a couple of weeks ago. And a gentleman who features in my documentary had two choices to talk about: either his experience of war in Iran or feeling abandoned as a child. He chose feeling abandoned. But at the time of the screening, the Ukrainian war had just started. And he didn't need to feel the guilt, but he started to think, oh, maybe I should have shared more about the war because I would have been able to give some insight to those who are in it.
Right.
And that's my understanding of that. That's my call to action for those who feel ready. And they will. You can just feel this line of people feeling ready. There is somebody out there who experienced this in real time. And they might have been able to synthesize their emotions, their feelings. If for some reason they decided to become a thought leader, speaker or whatever, write a book, an advocate, there is something in telling of their story and giving advice to those who are in it, because that's what we debated in that focus group, those who are currently in the war, physically there, then those who are outside and feel helpless. There is stuff in there. We will get it time and time again from the person who has experienced it. That has to become our real life data, as opposed to constantly heavily relying on peer-reviewed data alone. That is peer review. It's just we've created something around either the shame or completely understand. Most of us do not want to be cracked open for fear we won't be put back. But what if we could say sawubona to each other?
Yeah.
I think that would take that away.
Really powerful lesson here that I'm taking, Yemi, and I want to summarize it for the audience, and please correct me if you disagree with anything I'm about to say. But we do have this self-preservation that we won't talk about some pain, some trauma that we've been through. We're definitely heading towards discussing your documentary here. So you've been through that trauma, you self-preserve and you don't want to talk about it. But by sitting with that discomfort, and it is going to get uncomfortable, it's going to be cathartic for you coming out the other end, but it's also going to serve others. No matter what you're experiencing, there's thousands more like you out there that are going to benefit from you sharing your story and sharing your experience. So even though it's going to be uncomfortable, the benefit at the other end is going to be very enriching for you, and it's going to help others. Is that what I'm taking away?
Spot on. And it's important that you said it in your own voice and vibration, as I put it, because you've potentially reached a whole heap of other listeners that I couldn't reach. And this is the gift of speaking. People think, oh, why should I speak? Somebody else is doing it already. They don't have your voice, your vibration. So, yeah.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so let's talk about the documentary. It's amazingly powerful, 3-part documentary. Did I choose my trauma? let's talk about trauma. Everyone has it in their life. What advice do you have? We are the Leadership Project, so I want to steer a little bit towards that. What advice do you have to leaders in workspaces where there is trauma in workspaces? It does happen. It might be a team member that is going through some kind of trauma outside the workspace, or it could be some kind of traumatic event in the workspace, gaslighting, all kinds of things that happen in the workspace. What can you share with our leaders about what they need to know about trauma and how to manage it themselves and for their team?
Yeah, I think I typically would have spurted this out quite quickly, but yesterday was the first time I did a Slido or Mentimeter, when people answer questions anonymously in an audience. And I think we may have had about 1,000 people watching in total. And 83% said yes, they'd experienced trauma. Some said they didn't know, and some was a firm no. And for leaders, in my view, to be able to even respond to that, the acknowledgement of their own trauma. And in my TED talk, I highlight the fact that I was an absolute bubbling mess when I heard a 5-year-old man get on stage and talk about an incident that happened to him at 6-year-old, where he took his pet fish to school and the school bully smashed the glass out of his hand. And I remember crying my eyes out. And it was then I realized that trauma has no magnitude. To say trauma feels like something really huge, and I'm not trying to belittle or bigify anything, if that's a word. But we need to look at things that happened in our lives. And this is my plea to leaders, things that happened in your life that maybe you have an inkling has you operating in a way you don't really like, just so you can look at it, because that's where the depth of empathy is. If by all means you have lived an absolutely beautiful life, like genuinely happy for you and great to have you as a leader in particular, but you probably know someone who does, and that's the next step of empathy. It's actually getting close to understanding how trauma shows up in people. If you have a family member or a friend who's open to sharing and you can have that conversation, you can ask those difficult questions to understand what your team and what your organization is going through. It doesn't mean it's the same for everybody, but trust me, just the way you show up, the smile you give at that person when they come in really makes a difference. It's the reason why I was successful in my consulting business, because I connected with people. Yes, I was good at engineering, but I was absolutely brilliant at connecting with people. I'm also savage. Sometimes I can't have a conversation for too long, but I connected with them in 3 minutes to know that I fully understand if we found out their parent had passed away the day before or they didn't get the job promotion. That's a form of trauma, but you'd have to tap in beyond the fiscal paperwork and the profit and loss and GDP. And those are all valid, but you'd need to go back to empathy, which typically comes from our own pain or someone who's very close to us.
I'm hearing 3 powerful things there. The first one is processing your own trauma and having enough self-awareness to know whether things in your life are now impacting the way that you behave and the way that you lead your team, for example. So I will share, I don't know fully the reason why, but I can tell you I'm not good at challenging conversations, Yemi. So I consider myself to be a very good leader. I know my strengths, I know my superpowers, but I know that one of my weaknesses is to avoid confronting conversations. So that is impacting the teams that I lead, because when you avoid a confronting conversation, it usually gets worse, not better, right? So that's a bit of self-awareness for me. So self-awareness of your own trauma and seeing how it's presenting itself when you show up. Then the second part was then when you've got a team member that's going through something, to really see them and to show that you've seen them and to listen to them and to build that empathy. Everyone has got something going on in their life, and the more that you understand it, the more that you can see them and the more that you can help them. Would that be the fair summary there?
Absolutely. And you're spot on. And as you were talking, I was thinking, but what if there's the person who doesn't like doing that work? I couldn't hug people about maybe 12 years ago, and my daughter's 15. So even hugging her was difficult because I didn't grow up in a tactile, hands-on environment. And my mum very much does not show love in that way.
Right.
Didn't spend as much time with my dad. So I want to acknowledge that some people have their own things going on. And people, especially leaders, probably start to struggle with thinking this is a big responsibility. I put a post out saying, how can I teach my kids how to be a certain way when I never learned that as a child and I'm having to self-teach as an adult? Once again, not putting blame on anybody. My parents did a fantastic job, but we have to acknowledge that some things are not innate. And so for that reason, I just almost say, if you can't then really see them, as you were saying, because I think there are some leaders I think, what does that mean? If you can't really see them, just put yourself in their shoes, like literally put yourself in their shoes, and that will bring something out. But everything else you said, absolutely spot on.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. What about the element of professional help? So if you're in a situation where you've got a team member that has gone through something traumatic, could be in the workplace, could be outside the workspace, what recommendations do you have for leaders about when and if they should engage professional help for that team member?
Yeah, most employers at the moment have, here I think it's called EAP, Employee Assistance Program of some sort. One would hope that most organizations have that. I think also speak to the person. Say, would you like some external help, especially if it's to do with, say there's something either in the business, but that's why they typically have EAP being outside of the business. I think it's asking them. Most of the time we assume, some people don't think so. I would say definitely offer it to them as a choice, because, I've done the math. We are in our place of work almost 80% of our waking hours. So for me, I put big responsibility on employers to kind of offer that, not balance, offer that support. And so I think it's really great to at least offer something outside of the business so that they can just have that further distinction with the leftover 20% that they have. But yes.
Yeah, and that could be the safety that they need. It could be the psychological safety that they need, that they don't feel like they can talk about this in the workspace, but they're very happy
Correct.
outside the walls of the business. And I guess the other part is, connecting to someone that is a professional in that field, or connecting to a community that once again have experienced the same things that you're experiencing. And there may not be another human being in your organisational walls that have experienced the very thing that you're going through, but there's a damn good chance that someone outside the organisation or a community group or whatever the case may be has been through that very thing that you're going through or that your team member is going through. And we shouldn't feel at all threatened by the thought that they might go outside the walls of the building to get some help when they need it. All right. It is International Women's Day this month. It was earlier this month, and we're doing a profile of inspirational women throughout the month of March. One of the things that I've admired in your work as well, Yemi, is that you are a strong campaigner for equality in STEM. So in science, technology, engineering and math. And you are an incredibly successful engineer in a male-dominated world. Tell us more about how can we encourage more women into STEM careers and to get some more diversity in that career stream?
It's a great question. I go back to ask them what they want and the reason why they don't stay or aren't interested in it. Sometimes we have to go to the root cause, and that might mean, going into schools. And I know we've been talking about this for years, but I get the feeling we go into schools and we kind of don't have the dialogue. My daughter said, "I'm not good at math." Firstly, it became a mantra for her. And I don't know what happened, whether it could be the teacher. So I got her a personal tutor who gelled with her. And I do have to say that tutor had the same not same mannerisms, but had an understanding of why typically math tends to scare people. It was the mindset. If you're already told math is too difficult, that you can only do math if you're going into be doing a really great, you want to become an astronaut or this, you already start to attach a fear model that most of us already have imposter syndrome. So you start to tell that story. So very few people I see taking that approach. There's a reason why apart from the fact that for decades and centuries, there was an exclusion of women in these roles that was made incredibly hard. But we haven't gone to why. And I think that's one of it, like just working out with my daughter. But the minute she had that math tutor, it wasn't as frightening. So that's one. Then the next question is, how do we get women to stay in STEM? Let's first acknowledge that the pool of women in STEM is not high. So we have to acknowledge there's an element of recycling here. People are moving from job to job. We need to note that gap. Ideally, we should be preparing for the next generation. I think there are quite a few generations where the number of women is less. The number of engineers in particular in my field is even worse. Like we've got, I'm the woman who goes into an organization and sits with the engineer in his 70s and 80s, just trying to soak up all the wisdom. The transference isn't great. It's a bit poor. Transference even just with men and definitely with women. So we need to figure out that transfer of knowledge. And then the last one that I started is why are women leaving? And they're leaving, I think, partly with the conversations I've had, because they're trying to be morphed into operating with a male paradigm, a male view. And it's not to right or wrong anything, but
okay.
I think we have the whole gender conversation. Why would you be forcing someone to be something they don't think they are?
That's opening up a huge can of worms that I want to get into for a period of time. I want to reflect on some of the things that you said there. I want to talk about your daughter for a moment. And what I'm hearing there is potentially a situation where a bias, and there is a bias there that creeps in, turns into a story that turns into a limiting belief.
Correct.
And that limiting belief is really powerful. And if you think you're not good at math, you will never become good at math, right? So you got to change the story that you tell yourself about yourself or tell yourself about the situation. Okay, that's really powerful. Then that last bit, there's too much of an expectation that if a woman is to be successful in a male-dominated world, that she is the one that should change.
Yeah.
And to be more like men. And that's not what we want. We want people that turn up as their authentic self, that bring their diversity of experience to the table and a new set of perspectives, a new thinking.
But Mick, that's the juice, as you said. When do we realize that, well, what benefit can we get from having a woman in this role?
Yeah.
We cannot, the sameness would give us the sameness. We like variety. Celebrate and harness that.
Imagine the enrichment of problem-solving skills if you collect all of those diverse thoughts instead of just addressing things the same way that we've always done it. Yeah, really interesting. Thank you, Yemi. I think this may be a good way to now segue back to your own memo, right? So how you'll have a course that's building off from Did You Get the Memo to now teach people to create your own memo. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that was kind of like a spin-off, because you do something and then someone says, oh, can you coach me? And I was like, oh, no, I don't have time to coach one-on-one. And I wanted to do group. And then when I had a publishing house say, look, you need to create something, start creating assets. And it was never my intention. My intention was to just be. But, you live in a world where people do want more. They do want leadership. They do want guidance. And I guess from writing that book, I create my own memo. My daughter has just spent 6 months in the UK because I knew we needed the community. I know we needed the village. She was struggling with all the lockdowns we had. And as someone here with no family. And so I had to create that. And so I created a memo with her and her school here saying, I need her to go to the UK. Didn't give all the details, but she needs to see her dad. It's been 3 years. And typically someone would say, yeah, you can't do that. You can. Yeah, you've got to follow rules and guidelines, but you can. And so create your own memo is literally breaking down that belief system. And I promise you can do anything. I traveled twice during our lockdown Australia. One was to go do a TEDx talk and sit in Jack Canfield's house. You can create your own memo on anything. And that's what that course does. It actually gets you. It's not me telling you. I'm just kind of the person with the torch saying, okay, here's another path. There's 3 paths here. Which one do you want to take? I'm just holding the torch. But that's where the power is creating your own blueprint and changing it when you want to.
There's so many things that are coming to mind right now, Yemi, but it really comes down to this challenge the status quo and challenge the expectations that are put upon ourselves. So creating your own memo, in my view, from what I've seen from you, is about finding your own individual purpose and meaning as to where you want to be in the world and breaking the mold and ignoring societal expectations, ignoring the limiting beliefs and creating your own version of what your life needs to be. How's that as a reflection?
Oh, brilliant. I mean, you are absolutely brilliant at seeing and hearing people, but perfect.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Yemi. This has been absolutely wonderful. I've learned so much from this. I've just adored talking to you. I wish this could go on forever, but I know that you've got another engagement.
I'll come back for part 2, Mick.
Oh, fantastic.
I really would. Yes,
let's
do that.
Well, you know what? I don't want to put you on the spot here, but we're going to start a live streaming show soon that is going to have a Q&A element to it. I'd love to have you join that, and then people can ask you questions directly. Okay, fantastic.
Absolutely.
All right, so to bring us to a close, I'd like to ask you our rapid fire round, which is questions that we ask all of our guests. What's the one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you were 20, Yemi Penn?
Oh, you know when they say think outside the box? I wish I knew that there was no box.
Oh, yeah. Create your own memo. There is no box. I love it. Oh, that's brilliant. Okay, what's your favorite book?
Oh, Untethered Soul by Michael Singer.
Okay. I don't know that one. I'll look into that. That sounds interesting.
Brilliant.
Okay. And what
gives you freedom?
Nice. And what's your favorite quote?
If not you, then who?
Yeah, nice.
I don't know who wrote that, but I've been saying it a lot recently, and it might be a reminder to myself.
That's a great
if
reminder.
Not you, then who?
That's a great reminder for all of us. And finally, I'm sure that many people are very interested in what you've had to share today, Yemi. You've got your documentary, you've got your book, you've got your course. How do people get in contact with you if they'd like to know more?
My website is best, so it's yemipenn.com, YEMIPENN. And same, put my name in Instagram. Instagram is where I'm my realist self. It's where I'm also a clown, a comedian. I love to just be humorous. And if not LinkedIn. LinkedIn, it's a slightly different tone because I think you have to change what you say, but the same message. But Instagram and LinkedIn is where we can really connect and vibe.
Thank you, Yemi. And I'll put those links in the show notes so that everyone can find you. And we are going to stay in contact. And I've just adored this conversation. So thank you so much. We'll let you get to your next engagement. Thank you for sharing so openly. Thank you for your wisdom. It's been greatly enriching for me, and I know it would be for the audience as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Project podcast at mixbeers.com. A big call out to Faris Sadek for his sound design and editing of our audio and video content, and to the whole team at TLP, Joanne Gozon, Gerald Calabo, Rika Vidanes, and my wonderful supportive wife, Say Spears, who is also our operations manager. This show would simply not be possible without you. If you've enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and review at Apple Podcasts. You can catch the video podcast and our video of the week at the Leadership Project YouTube channel. And you can join the conversation at the Leadership Project Facebook community group. We look forward to bringing you more great content and interviews next week as we continue to learn together and lead together. In the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and always remember to challenge the status quo.